MUS239 final exam review. This particular video is going to focus on the written exam, which is 50 multiple choice questions, and I'm just going to jam through the topics item by item. So let's begin with the startup procedures. I'm going to go ahead and close this for a second. So say, and I'm just going to save this, say you started with a new session, you're opening Pro Tools for the first time. Now I'm going to bypass, obviously you're going to go and open Pro Tools. I'm going to bypass the waiting for the startup. This is what you get when your startup comes through. So your startup procedures, of course, in step 1 here, or step 2, after you open Pro Tools, step 2, you cancel. You're then going to look for the appropriate playback engine. For you guys, it's the FCA 1616. For the system that I'm on, it doesn't actually have that active. Instead, we have the Avid Inbox Pro, which actually doesn't even show on here. So let's see if we can get it back. After that is done, there we go. After that is complete, then you're going to go to Setup, I/O. Hopefully you remember this. Easy way to do this if you don't already have imported or exported, an exported saved .pio. Then the easy way to do this is just to go in and hit Command A, delete the path, hit default. Go to the output tab, hit Command A, delete the path, default, and in the bus section is the last one. Command A, delete the path, and then when you hit default here, just make sure it's set up for all buses. And there you go. Now in this situation, I have analog 1, 2 listed as my I/O, my main output, should I say, where for the FCA 1616, it's listed as line 1, 2. But there you go in a nutshell. There is a start procedure. After this, you can go ahead and hit Create New, and you're ready to create your session. Now I'm going to come back to, well, actually, I'll come back to this. Let me open up the session that I had previously, and let's jump into the next topic. And this is I/O settings, exporting and importing. I/O settings, export and import is all done again through the Setup I/O window. And all we have to do in any one of these tabs, all we have to do essentially is hit Export Settings, and we get to save a .pio anywhere. Now, preferably, this default folder is in the Documents folder under Pro Tools under I/O Settings, and it always shows up, but you can't carry it with you. So if you wanted to carry it with you somewhere, you'd want to go and drop it in your folder with your name, and then save that as that particular I/O. So like for you guys, maybe you're calling it FCA 1616 I/O, and you save it. Okay. Now, if we wanted to import this, let's just say I walked in and my I/O was all messed up. To import this, all we have to do is hit Import Settings and navigate to where we saved. So we could use any one of these, or again, we just need to navigate to a file called FCA 1616, and the extension is .pio. All right. Once you hit Open, you'll see it just brings back what we had, and then after this, you can just simply hit OK, and away you go. Now, in the next segment, creating new tracks. How do we do this? There's 2 ways to do this. We can go Track, New, or we can use the hotkey, and you can see it here, Command-Shift-N, Command-Shift-N, and there we go for new tracks. Now, a couple things about these tracks is you do need to understand track types. So in the next segment of track types, and of course, to create, you just hit create. But in the next segment that talks about track types, you do need to understand what they are. Now, obviously, we have mono and stereo. Mono is a single channel. Stereo is a dual channel. All right, so 2 channels, left and right. The audio track is where we record audio, simply put. The aux input is something that is either routed internally or externally, but it never records audio in the clip list. It can be used to bounce out audio, but it doesn't do it in the clip list, so you actually don't see audio show up in the edit window. The master fader controls the overall master output. MIDI tracks control MIDI data. And instrument tracks actually control MIDI data that is then run through a virtual instrument so that it outputs as audio. So, interestingly enough, this track carries audio and it records audio. This track carries audio. It can be used for busing and submixing, but it doesn't actually have audio printed on the clip list or in the edit window. And this is the master fader, which just controls the master volume output and allows you to put plugins in the master. This one carries MIDI data only and no audio on the track. This one carries both MIDI data and audio. And so that's basically how those are set up. And then lastly over here, you can use two different resolutions. One is samples used for audio, and the other one is ticks, typically used for MIDI. But you can also, if you were time aligning or time adjusting, you would use ticks as well. So, and then of course you just simply hit create, and there you go. You have your audio track. Well, let's just take a step back. I'm going to go and save this just for a sec. Let's just take a step back and close this, and open another new session to talk about the next segment, which is sample rate. So sample rate, which is seen here, sample rate is the resolution of frequency, so the frequency resolution that's going to be used in the session. And you can set it low, and the standard definition level for that, the lowest level you can use is 44.1 kilohertz, which is just essentially it's frequencies per second, which and it's snapshots that are being used, or samples per second. Essentially what it is it's in the sample, we're going to take 44,100 samples per second to provide standard definition resolution to our audio. Then the next level up is for film because it matches frame rate. And then once we go to the duplicates, so you can see 44.1 times 2 is 88.2. As we multiply this times 2, this becomes our first level of HD audio. High definition audio begins at 88.2 and also has 96K, which is the duplicate of 48. And then we duplicate that one more time, and we have 176.4 and 192K. So those are essentially Ultra HD levels. But the sample rate essentially is the resolution of the frequency, the quality of the frequency, and it's important to note that if you start low at an SD level, you can't ever really go up. But if you start high, you can always come down. Okay, so if you start with a better resolution. Just in the same, I always talk about it the same way you work with photos. If you took a photo with a low megapixel and then tried to blow it up, it can be bigger, but it's never more defined. It only actually looks worse. But if you took a photo with a high level of megapixels and resolution and blew it up, then it looks good. And then if you shrink it down, it still looks very well refined. So that's that in a nutshell. In addition to that, you have bit depth. Bit depth is the resolution of dynamics. So this is your dynamic resolution. Standard def is 16, HD is 24-bit, and there's an internal use of 32-bit float. But even though you can bounce this out, this is designed to be used in the system, and even though you can bounce it out as a 32-bit float, things like iTunes and Spotify and all those things will only at max use 24-bit. So it ends up getting dumbed down back to that. One more note, interleaved. You should remember what interleaved is, but interleaved is the option to tell the system that if you have channel or tracks with multiple channels, that they are then combined into one file. So if you had a stereo track, while you're recording a stereo track, it's going to be in the system, it'll be saving as one file with 2 channels, or a 5.1 track, 1 file, 5.1 or 6 channels. Okay, that's that in a nutshell. So let's go on to counter options. And here's our main counter up at the top. We also at one point in time actually utilized the big counter, which is Command 3. It's the same thing. These are literally the same thing. In the counters, though, you can see you need to understand the difference between these counter types. Bars and beats, specifically used for music, that allows us to lock in a grid that allows us to use bar beat information. Minutes and seconds, of course, is just general time. Okay, so it's literally minutes and seconds. Time code, which uses really minutes and seconds, is very specific because time code actually allows us to sync to external devices like video engines, which is great. Feet and frames actually does the same thing, but it's more of an old school approach. But a lot of times you can utilize frame by frame motion here, but you can still do it in time code. And then samples. We rarely use samples, but this actually calculates and shows like this session is at 44.1K. So you'll notice that as soon as I move a couple seconds up, you see that from a sample standpoint that I'm way, way, way up on the samples here. Let me open. I'm just going to expand controls. Sorry, I'm just going to change this view so I can see a little more of the zoom controls. So check this out. If I go to if I tell, let's see, I'm going to switch time codes and go back to minutes and seconds. Let me tell this to go to 0, 0, 1. And now I'm going to switch over to samples. Now my expectation is that since I'm at a 44.1 samples per second, if I'm at the 1 second mark, then from a sample standpoint, I'm at 44,100. Now we don't really use these a lot in general audio because this gets down to the sample level, and of course it's designed to allow for some flexibility, but it's not a very common use. In addition, let's look at some main windows. So like our next thing is talking about the main windows. There's only a few main windows. I'm going to zoom back out. This one is your edit window, this whole thing right here, all of what you see right here. You're going to see all of your edits and all of your tracks. Okay. If we switch over and hit Command equals, this is our mix window. It'll show you all the mix controls. I don't know where it went. Just did that. Oh, I think I just clicked it wrong. So there we go. This is our mix window. We then additionally have a couple of other things. We have a MIDI editor, which we use quite consistently. In addition to the MIDI editor, we also have the video view. Now, I don't have a video view up right now because of the fact that I don't have video in, but let me bring in a couple things. So if I Command-Shift in and I go ahead and add a MIDI track or instrument track, let's just say I do a stereo instrument track. As soon as I have that open and available, I have the MIDI editor. And this is where, of course, we can draw in or write in MIDI. I mean, you literally just go in and make MIDI notes. You know, we just plug them in. Away you go. And then, of course, if I import video, you know, once I have video in, then I can actually start utilizing these functions here. So let's see, I should have some video for this movie trailer video. Let's say we use this one. Okay. And now I have my video track, and you can see it. And this is the main, you know, one of the main windows we use when we do a lot of posts, of course. Here's this. Okay. Next, we're going to look at some tools, and I might as well just do this with this video in place. We'll go back around to importing video towards the end, but you saw the process. It was actually quite simple. So let me just get rid of this for the moment. So we're going to talk real quickly about some basic tools. Okay, so if we just zoom in over here, we have the zoom tool. You like to use it, or it's best to use it as a double-click function. Why? Because when you utilize the zoom tool in that fashion, it allows you to expound upon where your location is in the overall, like being able to see your overall session from end to end. And then, of course, you can see, you know, you can zoom in, or if you hold Option, you can Option click, you can zoom out. The trim tool, which of course allows you to just trim. Now, the trim tool, one of the requirements of the trim tool, and this is important to note in terms of the exam, if I try to do a trim in the middle of a clip, it literally will cut me there at that location. So it's not great if I have, sorry, if I'm just going to slice this up. It's not great if I have stuff that looks like this. The trim tool is not the greatest if I just want to cut something up in the middle, but I want to keep this piece over here, or if I wanted to cut up the way that I did that. So it literally only allows us to trim on the ends, okay, which is good and bad at the same time, you know. So you just have to switch over to a different tool if you want to do something in the middle. The other kicker here is, that's important for you to know, is the direction of the tool, the open direction of the tool tells us which way it's going to cut. So like the open direction from here, it's going to keep everything to the left. If I do it here, notice the open direction, like the letter C, it's going to keep everything to the right. If I was here and it flips me here, but I want to flip the other way truly, if you hold Option, it kicks you the other way. It just, you know, like if I toggle over this, it's kind of forcing me to only go this way, but what if I really wanted to go this way? You know, so there you go. There's that in a nutshell. Let me bring all this back, so I'm just going to hit Command-Z to undo, and we're back. Okay, now the selector tool, which is very commonly used, you could double click to get that clip. You can highlight, drag, click, and highlight. You can separate. If you wanted to separate, you can use the separate command, which is Command-E. If you wanted to just say, all right, I want to make that a separate clip. One of the easy things you can also do, of course, is you highlight something and hit delete, highlight something and hit delete. Of course, if you highlight something, you can also push play at that location, and that allows you to do a little bit more there. The grabber tool is a little bit easier for things like labeling the track if you double click it, and actually moving and sliding stuff. So let's say I did have these items cut up, and I wanted to, let me just cut a few things up for you. And I wanted to be able to move some stuff. I'm like, oh, I just want this a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way. This is the perfect tool for that because you can just very quickly, easily grab stuff and move it. Now, of course, remembering that nudging, which will come a little later, is something you could also do to make that happen. There is a scrubber tool. We didn't use it much, but the scrubber tool, I don't know why I'm having buffer issues, but the scrubber tool allows you to scrub through specific audio. And then the pencil tool allows you to write in stuff that needs to be written. It's mostly, I like to use the pencil tool for automation. If we go to the track view selector, we go to volume, you know, there's our automation, away we go, right? Not too bad, but of course we're not do that. So just make sure. Okay. So let's talk real quickly then about the recording process. The recording process, we're going to talk in a different video about setting up the mic, recording, and using the playlist. But let's just talk about the general recording process in itself. The recording process requires a couple steps. Probably the most important step to me, always, of course, is labeling the track. So we just double-click on the track, the nameplate, and we title it. Let's say we call this Mic 1. Okay. A lot of times, you know, you might actually call it whatever the instrument is. So let's just say this is a vocal. I'm just going to call it Vox. Okay. And then I want to make sure that my output is routed to the correct location and I have the right input selected that's from the interface of the channel that I'm going to use. Once I have that ready to go, I can literally just pick my location in the timeline. So a lot of times you just want to figure out where you're supposed to be recording. And of course, I'm going to move it into bars and beats, time code wise, or time counter wise, just to make sure that I keep track of this. But a lot of times I want to give myself some sort of prep beat. So most of the time I may like, let's say I want to start recording at bar 9 beat 1. I'm going to back up and give myself a couple counts, provided that there's a click. So sometimes it's a 8 count if it's a 7-1. So let's say I go in and create. I'm going to go to track and create, click track, just so that I have it. And my video engine is having trouble, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it for now, so I don't have to deal with that. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so if I start at bar 7 beat 1, and I want to start recording on bar 9 beat 1, then I'd want to start recording preemptively and actually record at bar 9 beat 1.